In this lesson, we're going to give a brief introduction to Microsoft Excel. Now, in our first lesson, we're going to cover copying and pasting, entering formulas, relative versus absolute cell referencing, and using Excel functions. In subsequent lessons, we'll cover sorting data, frequency tables, charts, histograms, and scatter plots. And then we'll also cover installing and using Megastat, which is a software application that's often used in statistics courses. Now, Excel is what we call a spreadsheet application, and its usefulness comes from the ability to store large amounts of text and numeric data and to perform dynamic updating, which means that if you have a large amount of data stored in your spreadsheet and you need to change one entry, one numeric entry say, you can change that entry and then all of the other data in your spreadsheet that is linked to that entry will be updated automatically. So that's a huge and useful feature of a spreadsheet application. And these spreadsheet applications were really big game changers when they came into play several years ago, and they became widely available, especially in fields like accounting, where you need to store large amounts of financial data, tax data, and then make changes and corrections. Now let's take a look at the layout of Excel and see how its commands are organized. Now, the version of Excel that we have here comes from Office 365. Now, if you have a different version like 2010 or 2013, the commands that we're going to be looking at, they are all there in 2010 and 2013, but they may be at a little slightly different location. Now, in Lesson 1, we're not going to run across that, but with respect to the charting features, some of the charting features are laid out just a little differently in 2010 versus Office 365. But they're still there. It's just in a different location. Now, let's look at some of the command layouts for Excel here. You notice this area, big area right in here, that's where we store our data. This is called a sheet, a worksheet. Now, you notice down here we have our tabs down here for various sheets. These are our sheet tabs down here. Our active sheet is currently sheet 1. We can have multiple sheets in a workbook. So, for example, you can insert new sheets if you like. For example, just press that little plus button right there and you'll add a new sheet. And you can rename that sheet just by right-clicking on it and then selecting Rename. So that was a right-click and then rename and call it anything you want. Oh, name was already taken. Okay, call it something else. My sheet 2, like that. You notice down here you have a zoom bar right over here. That comes in handy. This is down in the lower right hand corner if you're doing presentations and you have to make everything larger so your audience can see it. That comes in handy. That's a good size right there. This cell right here that we currently have highlighted right here, that's called our active cell. That is where we enter our data, so that's ready to take data. If we click in it, we can type something like 1, 2, 3, so there's some numeric data, and then just hit enter. And now that data is stored in that particular cell. Now let's notice how the cells are referenced. If you look across the top of the page here, across the top of the sheet, you see the columns are organized by letters A, B, C, D, E, and so on. So these are our columns. And the rows are organized by numbers. Row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, and so on. So for example, this particular cell right here would be referenced as cell H5. So this is cell H5 right here. All right. And of course you notice how the active cell has this border going around it. It also has that little square button right down there. That's called a fill handle. That has some functionality to it. If you were to grab that fill handle and drag down, you notice how it's creating H6, 7, 8, and 9. You can use that to create sequencing of data, and we'll talk about that later. So let's just delete that. So now if you want to delete something, you can just grab it with your mouse, just click with your mouse right in the center of the cell, highlight everything like that, and then hit delete. And there you go. Now it's gone. Let's see. Up here we have our tabs. You notice all these tabs up here. We have Home, Insert, Draw, Page Layout, Formulas, and so on. Each tab has a ribbon associated with it. The ribbon contains commands relevant to the various tabs up here. Your Home tab has the most common commands that you're going to use as you're working with Excel. Notice right in here you have your formatting of cells, so you could change the coloring of cells, change the font style, and so on. So if we click on that 1, 2, 3, and now we can make it, we just made it red, turn it back to black again. This is centering of cells right here. You can make them left justified, center the text in the cell, or right justify it, either text or numeric data. And so if I left justify it, right justify, or center it, and then right justify it, and so on. Over here you have some cell formatting. Over here you have insert and delete. These are some important commands over here. If I want to insert a row, a sheet row, I can just highlight a particular cell, click on Insert, Insert Sheet Rows. And there we just inserted a row. If I want to delete that row, just click on Delete, and then delete that sheet row. And it's gone. We can delete entire sheets if we want. Like this one down here, say I wanted to delete my sheet 2 that we had created. Just click on it, come up here to delete the entire sheet. And then it'll ask me, do you want to delete it? Yes, I do. And there we go. Over here you have some sorting commands, which are important. We'll look at those later. And then find and search commands over here. Insert, we'll be using that. We have charting tools in here that we'll be looking at later on. You can draw in Excel. So if you wanted to just write something in Excel, you can highlight that, draw, and then you can just say write up whatever you want. All right, erase that. Page layout is sort of self-descriptive, that you can set the page orientation, portrait versus landscape, and so on. Grid lines is important. I found that to be useful. The one thing I like to do when I print a spreadsheet is I like to see my grid lines when I print it. So if you would have to highlight that, and then when you print it, you will see the grid lines. So that's a nice thing to have. I prefer to have grid lines when I print a spreadsheet. Formulas, these are just, we'll be looking at these later on. So Excel has a lot of built-in formulas that you can access. Data we won't be doing so much with. You can access data from other databases in Excel, link data from other databases. That's a more advanced topic. View, some things come in handy here, like you can freeze panes. I find that useful at times. For example, if we want to freeze the first column, click on that, and notice now if I scroll to the right, the first column stays fixed. It doesn't go away, so I can always see that first column. So that's useful. You can do the same thing with the first row as well. So I could freeze the top row, and now when I scroll down, that top row will stay. See, lesson 1 stays fixed. And then we'll unfreeze everything then. Let's see, another useful thing here. Macros, we won't be getting into macros in this lesson, but this is a very powerful feature of Excel, the ability to write macros. Macros are like small programs that you can write when you need to do very repetitive tasks. So let's take a look at copying and pasting now. Go back to our Home tab. Now let's delete. I'm going to delete what I have here. I'm just going to highlight it like that. Click delete. Now let's see. Let's do some copying and pasting. So let's create. Now I'm going to change the width of this column here. Notice I'm going to grab that up there and just make it a little more narrow. Okay. Now let's put in some data into our Excel spreadsheet, and then we'll practice commands related to copying and pasting. So let's do this. Watch this. 1, 2. Now say I want to create a consecutive list of numbers. Now just put the numbers, you can try this as well. Put 1 and 2 into your spreadsheet, and then grab that little fill handle there and drag downward. Notice how it creates a consecutive listing of numbers like that. So we go from 1 to 10, that way we don't have to type it. Now this is useful. You can also do the same thing with months as well, like and then highlight those, and Excel is smart enough to recognize then that you want to create the months like that. Alright, now let's delete all that data. You can just click on the cell, the column header right there, like that. That highlights that column, and then you can just hit delete. And that wipes out all that data. Alright, now to copy and paste data, say we want to copy this data to another location in our spreadsheet. We would just put our mouse in the center of that cell, drag downward, highlight everything, and then you can either right click and hit copy, or I just like to use keyboard commands where I hit Control C. Notice how you get this little moving outline of your cells. That tells you that you're ready to copy or move those cells. So then just go to another location in your spreadsheet, like over here, say we're at E6, and then just hit Control V. I'm going to hit, once again, that's Control V as in Victor. And I copied that data. Now if you wanted to move it, oh by the way, if you want that little outline to oh, I hit Control V again right there, so I copied it to another location. I'll delete that. Okay, yeah, as I was saying, when you do Control C, as in Charlie for copy, if you want to stop the copy command, you can hit Escape. So notice Escape then just wipes that off of the clipboard, and then if I hit Control C, then nothing will happen, or Control V, sorry. If I hit Control V, nothing will happen. Alright. Now say you wanted to move that data to another location. You can highlight it, and then click, either right click and click Cut, or you can do Control X, will do the same thing. Control. Oops, let me Control X. And then if we move to another location like over here, and then go Control V, okay, so it actually moved it now. It deleted from where it was originally and moved it to our new location. Okay. Now let's delete this. So I'm just going to grab the mouse here, highlight everything, and then just hit delete. Alright, now we're going to look at entering formulas, mathematical formulas. In Excel, whenever you want to enter a formula, like say you want to do just something really simple like evaluate 3 times 5. To do that in Excel, you have to execute a formula command starting with the equals sign. So you actually have to enter equals, so notice I have the equals right up here, and then 3 times 5. Notice the multiplication symbol is the asterisk right there. And now if you hit enter, you'll see 15 located right there. Now in Excel, the operations that are supported are addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and the exponential operation. So those are our 5 common operations that we'll be using. It also has other mathematical operations built in, like trigonometric operations, but we're not going to be using those. Now, when we entered this formula, I said that we have to use the equals first when we're entering a mathematical formula. What would happen if we didn't type in the equals symbol? What would happen if we just typed in 3 times 5, like that? Well, what would happen then is you would just get 3 star 5. So in other words, Excel is treating this like text, 3 star 5. So if you want to change that, here's another feature of Excel. To change that, we can go up into either into our formula bar up here, or we can hit F2. Once again, that's F2 will put you back in the cell where you can edit it. Do that again. F2, move over, put an equals there, and then hit enter. All right. And by the way, when you're entering formula or data into a cell, I always just enter it right into the cell, but you can also put it in your formula bar up here. This is your formula bar right here. So if I wanted to type something in this cell right here, in cell A4, say I want to type in evaluate 3 to the 2 power. So I would type in equals 3 hat 2. And 3 squared should give me back 9. Well, and it does. All right. Now if you wanted to do something like the square root function, well, the square root is a number raised to the 1/2 power. So say we wanted to take the square root of 16, we would type in equals 16 hat. Now be careful, you have to do parentheses, parenthesis 1 divided by 2, like that, and then you'll get back 4. Now let's take a look at cell referencing. So let's delete everything here. And let's enter some data into our spreadsheet. Let's just put in and then over here in column B, what we're going to do now is we're going to enter in a formula where we want to add up the numbers in column A, and we're going to put that right here. So say we want to add those numbers up. Now here's how we can do that. We'll just type in equals, and we're going to reference cell A1 like this. Notice how when I type A1, how A1 becomes highlighted in blue. So that's nice because it's telling me now, Excel is telling me that we are referencing cell A1, and then we want to add cell A2 to that, and then A3. And then just hit enter. And so there, 15 is the total of A1 through A3. Now if we go back and we change any of those values, say you change the 4 to a 10, notice that Excel dynamically updates your formula that was referencing cell A1. Now, watch what happens when we copy this cell somewhere. So let's highlight that cell, A4, that's where our formula is. Hit Control C. Okay, so you see the outline is now moving. We're ready to paste it somewhere. And let's put it right here in cell B4. And let's see what happens. So now we're going to hit Control V or right click and paste. Doesn't matter which one you do. When you paste, I'll talk about this more later, there are options for pasting. You would want to select the first option there, just regular paste. All right, we'll talk about the other one here later. So let's just paste that cell right there. And you notice what we get is and now let's hit escape to stop that outline from moving. So I'm going to hit escape. All right. Well, you notice what happened is when we copied the formula from cell A4 to B4, it changed. It's no longer adding up the cells A1 through A3. Instead, if you look up here in your formula bar, it's adding up B1 through B3. And we can edit this formula, remember, by hitting F2. We could, there, so now we see that the formula is B1 plus B2 plus B3. So you notice what happened, the formula changed when we copied it somewhere. And that's because we are using what's called relative cell referencing. When we typed in our original formula over here, we just typed in A1 to reference cell A1, the value in cell A1. That's called a relative cell reference, meaning that when we move it somewhere, it will change accordingly. So if I copy it to the right to, if I were to copy this formula over to column D, all of the A's would change to D's. Also notice if I copy it downward, they will change as well. So if I take this formula right there and I go Control C, if I copy it down here to cell 10, so I move it down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cells down, well, it changed. And how did it change? Well, let's hit F2 and look at it. Notice that each row reference was incremented by 6 units. So A1 changed to A7, A2 changed to A8, and A3 changed to A9. So the row referencing also changed. And that will be true no matter where I copy it in the spreadsheet. So if I copy this down here, so there it is copied now. And if we look at it, hit F2 to look at that formula that's in cell F13 now, you notice the A's were changed to F's, and all of the numberings were changed as well, corresponding to how far down the sheet we moved. So A1 is now F10, A2 is F11, and so on. So that's called relative cell referencing because the references that we make are relative to the location where our formula is located in the spreadsheet. Now say we didn't want that to happen. Say I wanted to, when I copy this formula down here, I don't want it to change. I want it to keep the same cell referencing. Well, then we can make our cell references what we call absolute in order to do that. So watch this. I'm going to delete this, clean this up a little bit. Let's go back up to cell A4. We'll hit F2 to edit it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put, let's first of all put dollar signs in front of the A's. Right there. All right. Now watch what happens when we copy the formula left and right. So now if I go Control C and I move over and we go Control V, okay, well now my cell referencing did not change. Look what happened. I'm going to highlight, let me hit Escape here, highlight that cell B4, highlight it, hit F2. Now you notice we're still referencing the same cells. What the dollar sign does is it fixes the columns. When you put the dollar sign in front of the column lettering, it fixes the columns. However, it does not fix the rows. We would need to put dollar signs in front of the row numbering as well to do that. Notice if we copy this formula down somewhere else, let's say we do, let's say we'll just copy it over here to cell E10. Okay, well let's see what happened. Well, notice the column stayed fixed. I'm still referencing column A, but the row numbering changed. So to keep the row numbering from changing, you need to put dollar signs in front of the row numberings as well, and then the column and rows will be absolute. They will not change. So let's do that. So go back up here, hit F2, and we'll put dollar signs in front of the numbers, the row numbers now. Now, no matter where we copy that formula, we will always be referencing cells A1 through A3. So copy it down here. Notice we still have a 21. Hit F2. And notice it is still referencing cells A1 through A3. Hit Escape to exit out of that. Let's take a look at two other useful features, little tricks in Excel. The first one is this paste special command. Say we wanted to copy that number, which is currently 21, down to another location in our spreadsheet somewhere, but we want to copy it as a number, not as a formula. Well, what you would do then is you'd use the paste special command. So if we copy that, just hit Control V or copy by right-clicking, and then go to another cell somewhere in your spreadsheet. Now right-click with your mouse and then choose the paste option. You see the number 1, 2, 3 right there. That will paste 21 into that cell location as a number, not as a formula. So watch, if I click that number 1, 2, 3 clipboard icon right there. Alright, so 21 is right there. But now notice that is a number. Look up here in the formula bar, you see it's a number 21. It's not a formula anymore. So if I were to come in here, highlight that cell and hit F2 as well, you see it's not a formula. Whereas if I come down to this number 21 down here and hit it, notice in my formula bar, I see the formula. I can also hit F2 to edit that formula in the cell. And so you see this is the actual formula, whereas this one up here is just the number. So that's the paste special command. We'll do that for you. Now here's another trick. If you want to see where all the formulas are located in your spreadsheet, like right here I see numbers, but some of these numbers are formulas, and I want to see which cells actually contain formulas without going and highlighting every single one and looking up in the formula bar here. Here's a little trick. Hit the Control tilde button. Now, where is the tilde button? Well, let me show you there. The tilde button is usually on keyboards. It's right aside of the number 1. The tilde is a symbol that looks like this. Let's see if I can type it into a cell here. You see that little symbol right there? Let me blow that up for you. Look for that on your keyboard. That's called a tilde symbol. And hit Control and whatever that button is. It's usually aside of the number 1 button on most keyboards. So let me delete that. So if I hit Control and tilde, notice what happens. I see all of the cells that have formulas in them right now. And if I highlight one, it tells me which cells are being referenced. Okay, see if I highlight this one down here, I see cells A1 through A3 are being referenced down here in an absolute fashion. To get out of this, hit Control tilde again. And then that takes you back to the original screen. Alright. Now let's take a look at using functions, built-in functions with Excel. So let's do this next. Let's delete all this data here. Or you can create a new sheet if you'd like. I'm just going to delete it. And let's just enter some more data to play with. Say we'll just enter 1, like we did before, 2, highlight that, grab the fill handle, and drag down. Right there. And I think I'm actually going to move that data over here. I'm just going to put something aside of it here. So watch this. Control X. I'm just going to put it right here. Control V. Okay. Now down here, say we wanted to add all of those up. Well, instead of typing in like we did before equals A1 plus A2 plus A3 and so on, that's rather cumbersome. Excel has built-in functions, and one of them is called the sum function. So if I want to total these up, alright, now watch this. Now we're going to enter in a function in here. So go up to the, now there's several ways you can do this. If you've done this before, this may not be the way you've done it, but there are different ways to do this. Hit the, you see the little f of x right there? That's insert a function. So click on that, and you come up with a dialog box over here. And in this dialog box is a listing of all the functions that Excel has built into it. You can see you have a little category drop-down box here, and the functions can be listed by category, like you have financial, date and time, math and trig, statistical, and so on. Now we want to look for the sum function. That's usually under the most recently used, but I don't see it here on mine. So you could either type the name in up here that you know that you're looking for, like sum, and then hit enter, and right there it is, SUM. Or you could look under all. We know it would be under there because that lists all of your functions, so it would be down here somewhere, SUM. Well, it's easiest just to type it in. Right there it is, SUM. And so then just highlight SUM and hit OK. Now make sure you have this cell highlighted, B11. Make sure that's highlighted. Hit OK. And then you see it's asking you what cells you want to add up. So it already recognizes that above this cell location you have numeric data, so it's figuring that you want to add up those numbers. Or you can click on that little red arrow right there and highlight the data you want to add up, and then hit OK. Don't worry about number 2, and then hit OK again. And there you go, you've added up all of those numbers. Now let's look at the function that is typed in here. Well, we see it up here in our formula bar, but it's a little easier to see if I hit F2 here. Notice it is equals SUM B1. Now notice the, this is very important, the little colon right there to B10. That's our sum function. Now, if you're used to using the sum function, you could just type that in by hand. Watch, I'll delete it, and then I'll just type in equals SUM parenthesis, and then I'll just highlight this data up here, close off my parenthesis, and then hit enter. Alright. Now that colon is important. Watch this. I'm going to hit F2. If I change that colon, if I change that to a comma, then all I'm adding up would be cells B1 and B10 and nothing in between. So the colon, that colon tells Excel to add up everything between B1 and B10. Okay, so that's a built-in sum function. Now, if you've done this before, you're probably used to using auto sum, so I'm going to delete that and watch. We could just go up here and go to your Home tab, and you see auto sum right here. Just click on that auto sum, and right there it puts it in for you automatically. Equals sum B1 through B10. It looks above for numeric data, and it figures that that's what you want to add up, and so it does it for you automatically. And then just hit enter, and it's the same result. Now say we wanted to calculate the average of those numbers. Well, there's an average function that's built into Excel. So if we go and click on the f of x, now average is under statistical. So right there's statistical, and right there is my average. So I would click on that, click on OK. It's asking me for what numbers do I want to take the average of. So now it's sort of mistakenly put in B11 there. I only want to go from B1 to B10. So I will click on this, Go over here, highlight what I want to take the average of, just the numbers 1 through 10. I don't want 55 in there. And then hit enter, and then click on OK. And there we go. The average is 5.5, which makes sense because the total was 55 when you added them all up, and then you divide by how many data values you have, which is 10 in this case. 55 divided by 10 is 5.5. You could also type that in by hand, of course, and then just highlight those cells and hit enter. All right. There's also a useful feature called the standard deviation. You'll run across that in your statistics class. So now that standard deviation is a measure of variation in that data set. You'll get to that a little when you take statistics, but for right now, let's just see where that function is located. You'll study that in more detail when you get to statistics. So it's under statistical, and if you come down here, we look for STDEV. Now you see there's several different STDEVs. There's .P, .S, STDEVA, and STDEVPA. So there's like 4 different ones. We want the sample one. See, if you notice when you highlight a formula, it gives you a little description of it. So it tells us in this case that STDEV.S estimates the standard deviation based on a sample. That's the one that we want. So we'll click on OK, and then the numbers we want to take the standard deviation of, highlight those, hit enter, and then OK again, and there we go. And of course you could do that by hand. Equals STDEV.S, parenthesis, and then highlight like that. And there we go. Same result. Now let's do this small exercise. We want to write a small spreadsheet to calculate the balance of funds invested at an interest rate R compounded n times per year after t years. So follow along. We're going to set it up like this. Let's just create a new spreadsheet here. Create a new one, or just click on an empty one. And what we want to do is this. We're going to have the principal is the amount we invest. We're going to have an interest rate R. We're going to have the compoundings per year. We're going to have the term, which is the number of years. And then the balance. Now let's stretch that column out a little bit. I'm just going to put my cursor over here. A little trick right here. If you put your cursor right here and double click, it will automatically adjust the width of your column to accommodate whatever you have in that column. Oops, I see I have a misspelling there. Compoundings per year. Now what we want to do is we're going to do this. Let's say we invest $1,000 at some interest rate, like let's say 5.2%. The number of compoundings per year, let's say, is 12. That would be monthly. The term number of years, let's say 10 years. Now what we want to do is we want to put a formula down here that uses this information to calculate the balance in our account. Now if you recall, the formula is going to be this. I'm just going to write it on the screen here. Remember, our balance is going to be our principal P times 1 plus R divided by n, where n is the number of compoundings, all of that raised to the n times t power. Alright, so that's the formula that we have to type in right here. Now when we type it in, the P, the R, the N, and the T are going to have to reference the appropriate cells. So let's see, the P is actually in cell B1. So instead of the P, we would type in B1. So we're going to have to type this in as, what's going to go in this cell, in cell B5, is going to be equals B1 times 1 plus. Now we have to be careful. R, it's supposed to be, right now it's a percent, 5.2%. But remember when we're dealing with percents in any formula, we don't want 5.2, we want 0.052. This number divided by 100. So we're going to have to go cell B2 divided by 100. Close the parenthesis off like that, and then divide that by, let's see, N is in cell, the number of compoundings, that's in cell B3. Close that off, and then we're going to have to raise that all to the N times T power. Now N is in cell B3 times, and then the T is in cell B4. And that's how we will have to enter this formula. So let's type that in here now. Now notice when I type, I like to close my parentheses off right away and then move back inside. Excel sometimes doesn't like that, but I just hit OK. So close it off, I move back inside, and then I'm going to type in 1 plus B2 divided by 100. Move outside those parentheses, divide by B3. Move outside, raise it all to the B3 times B4 power. And there you go. Take a good look at that. That's how we need to type it in. Then hit OK. And there's our balance. So that would be our balance after 10 years with a principal of $1,000 at 5.2% compounded 12 times per year. And we can change these numbers up here to see how our balance would be affected. Suppose we changed our compoundings to daily, so that would be 365. So we could say 365 right there, hit enter, and it changed. Let's see, what did it change from? It changed from 12 was what? Let's do this. I'm going to go Control C. I'm going to paste special down here. Okay, there's the number, not the formula. Go up here, change that to 365. So it changed by a little more than $1. Just about $2, not quite, but okay, not much. We could change our interest rate from 5.2 to, let's say, 6.2. Now that's going to be a big change. 1858, and so on. Change that back to 5.2. And there we go. All right. One thing you might want to be careful of here, if I had formatted that cell as percent, now to format a cell, right click, down here, format cells. Okay. If I had formatted that cell as a percentage, then you would not need to divide by 100. Anytime you reference that cell, Excel will automatically divide it by 100 for you. Okay, so watch this. If I change it to 5.2, okay, and then 2%, and then I change that to 5.2 up here. Okay, now my formula, I would no longer divide that by 100 because Excel will automatically do that for me. And you see we get our, change that back to 12, and we get the same number that we did before. And you see Excel automatically puts the little percent symbol there. So you have to be careful of that. If someone had a cell formatted as a percent, then in a mathematical formula somewhere you do not need to divide by 100. Let's see. Over here, I noticed one thing over here. That looks like I got a little mark there on my screen. That is not a minus, right? That's just a... Let me erase that. Right over here. Okay, that's not a minus. Take note of that. Let's change that cell formatting back. So once again, that's a useful thing to know, the cell formatting. Change that back to just a general value. Then I need to change this to 5.2. Change that back to a divide by 100. Alright, and there we go. Okay. Now, say you wanted to round that number. Now, currently it is rounded to 2 decimal places, but you see if I widen the width of my column, it's actually more than 2 decimal places there. If you wanted to round that to 2 decimal places, there are 2 ways you could do that. You could actually use the round function. Watch this. Then I'll go all the way to the end and put comma 2. That tells Excel to round all of this to 2 decimal places and then output that value into the cell. So I'll hit enter now. And now it's rounded to 2 decimal places exactly. You could also, oops, I just deleted it by accident. Oh, here it comes, this is where it comes in handy. Undo that. There we go. You might also think that you could format the cell to 2 decimal places. Watch this. If I go format number to 2 decimal places, well, that's okay. It'll display 2 decimal places, but in any other subsequent mathematical calculations I have in my spreadsheet somewhere else, it will use the full number. It will not use 1680.14. It'll use the full number like this. Whereas when you use the round function, then any other formula in your spreadsheet, it will use the number rounded to 2 decimal places. So you have to be a little careful with that. Alright, so that concludes this lesson on some basic features of Excel. And in another lesson, we'll take a look at creating charts and histograms and frequency tables.